Welcome to the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Anita Brooks, and here you'll find teaching topics, interviews, conversations, and coaching tips, all designed to help you level up. We all lead someone. The question is, are we leading well, exceptionally well? So join me on a quest, not for perfection, but absolutely for exceptional leadership. Well, hello, exceptional leaders. Today I want to talk about something that for me is a little bit fun, but as always, I will remain focused on exceptional leadership. So last night I was watching one of my favorite TV shows. I don't watch a lot of television, but when I do, it's usually something that either has to do with true crime or business. I know I'm a little bit of a weirdo and a geek, but that's just who I am. But one of my favorite shows is on the History Channel, and it's The Food That Built America. And I was watching a program on the coffee wars, American coffee wars. Now look, I don't know about you, but I love coffee. Most leaders I know do as well. I know there's a few exceptions out there, but the majority of us, we do run on caffeine, especially first thing in the morning. I've had periods of my life where I, took a break from caffeine, which was very healthy for me. And here's an interesting fun fact that some of you may not know. I did not start drinking coffee until I was 33 years old. I was not one of those people that started young. I don't know why. I always liked the smell of coffee, but I did not like the taste of it. And then in 1997, I actually donated one of my kidneys. And after the transplant, really bizarre, I have no explanation for this, but I almost immediately developed a desire and love of the taste of coffee. I know it's just really, weird. But anyway, as an aside, but what I want to talk about are the coffee wars, because I think this is very interesting from a leadership perspective. One, the emphasis this month is on performance. And so I just want to say, coming right out of the box, one of the things that fascinated me as I was watching these stories of, in this case, it was Starbucks and Dunkin Donuts, the different ways we can approach the same topic or issue or opportunity as leaders. In other words, you can have two vastly different leaders by personality, by interest, and so forth. And they will approach the same thing in a very different way. And I think one of the lessons we can all learn is many times there's not necessarily a wrong way. It's just a different way of doing it. And so sometimes we will over question ourselves or doubt ourselves if we're not doing things in alignment with the way others are doing them. But I think exceptional leaders actually are energized by that sense of being a change agent and doing something that sets themselves apart, something that no one else has ever done, pioneering. I know that type of passion is infused in who I am. And so I think for many of you that may be the case too. And let me just say, if that's you, don't overthink, don't overdoubt yourself. Be brave, be courageous, and try some of those things, because you never know what the outcome might be. And if you're running against brick walls, or you're really feeling stuck, or as if other people around you are just constantly negative and naysaying, just resolve not to let that pull you down into the abyss. If you have a vision, then follow that through. Now, you need to take your cautions as you go along. You need to be keeping your finger on the pulse of the finances. You need to be measuring and monitoring those. You need to be willing to quickly make adjustments if necessary. But at the same time, just because you need to make a change doesn't mean that you need to make a stop. And so again, if you have that vision and something that you deeply at the core you believe in, and you have that feasibility to keep progressing it forward, then by all means, I would say do so, because you could be an innovator like some of these folks we're going to talk about today. So before though I jump into the stories that I find so fascinating, I just want to share some fun facts about coffee, because again, I have developed a love of coffee. And so let's just talk about this. I think it's interesting. Did you know that coffee is only second to oil production as being considered the most valuable legally traded commodity in the world? I didn't know that until I went in to do some research for this podcast. Fascinating stuff for me. So and the other thing is like Americans really did not develop coffee as their kind of go-to choice beverage. And again, I'm speaking for the majority, generally. I know that there are some who don't care for coffee, but for most of us, this love of coffee and this regular coffee availability only came about in the 20th century. So prior to that, coffee wasn't like a thing in America or even in some of the more global parts of the world. So today, though, we drink it in massive quantities. Did you know that it is estimated, this is a staggering number, 2.25 billion cups of coffee are consumed every day worldwide. And in the US, that New Yorkers are estimated to drink 7 times the amount of any other US city. I think that's just so crazy, but it's crazy fun. The French writer and philosopher Voltaire, he was said to have drunk 40 to 50 cups of coffee a day. Now look, I don't know about you. There is no way I could drink that much coffee. I'm actually one of those coffee, I won't call myself a coffee connoisseur, but I'm certainly a regular coffee drinker, but I don't have to drink it every day. And if I have coffee, like say from 2 p.m. after, I will lay in bed at night awake most of the night. I can't sleep. There's something about that time period. Recently, I was with a friend of mine in, where were we at? New York, Pennsylvania, somewhere. We were on a business thing, but we just kind of went off to do a little fun afternoon. So we did one of our shared favorite things. We went to a bookstore that had a coffee cafe in it. And so we were there in the afternoon though. And she says, "Hey, you want to get a coffee?" Well, instinctually, the first thing that I said was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." Then I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. Oh no, like it's after 2:30. I can't do coffee. I won't be able to sleep tonight." And she's like, "Well, they actually have like little mini cups. So you could get one of those." And I was like, "Oh, well, I could probably do a mini. Yeah, that sounds good." So I got a hazelnut latte, one of my favorites, and I drank this little mini. I did not sleep that night. I mean, it was insane. I'm laying there. I'm like, it was such a small little coffee, but it has that impact on me. Some of you are not that way. But Voltaire apparently either wasn't that way, or maybe that's why he got so much done, was because he was running on so much caffeine and he didn't get that many hours of sleep a night. I don't know. But 40 to 50 cups a day, that is insanity to me. But we human beings, it's not just Americans, but we human beings, we do love our coffee. And I think it's so much fun when, I go back and I look at historically how coffee even came to be, discovered by human beings. It was because there were some goat herders, and they started noticing that their goats, after they would eat these certain berries, that they would be much more energetic, and they're jumping and frolicking around and being all playful and everything. And so the humans, after seeing enough of this, decided, hey, maybe they're onto something. Maybe we should try this. And they started playing with the fruit and the beans, and they eventually learned how to roast them. And today we all benefit from that. So now we actually get to enjoy coffee on a regular basis. And I feel like it's a real blessing that we do. So let's go to those coffee wars though, because I do think it's fascinating the different way that some of the coffee companies have approached this beverage of choice by so many people. And I'm going to focus on some American businesses because, my P4 power coaching practice, one of the things that I really hone in on is, our mission is to increase the income, prime the profits, and to strengthen the sustainability of American businesses. I applaud and I celebrate any other global markets out there, but I'm an American. And as an American, American businesses are where my heart is, where my passion is, and they're the ones that I want to help the most. So with that, I'm going to focus on these Americans. So the coffee wars actually, I think there's been a few remunerations of these coffee wars or whatever. But, when Starbucks got involved in the coffee business, Dunkin' Donuts was already in existence. Dunkin' Donuts was founded by a gentleman that had this vision of, almost like an old diner type of philosophy, and people could kind of belly up to the counter and they could have a donut or two with some coffee in the morning, and that's how they started. After a few years, though, there began to be a decline. And this is just my personal belief, but I think a lot of that was simply tied to the fact that people got busier in the U.S. We became more hurried and harried. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing, but it was certainly a realistic thing. And so with that, people didn't have time to lounge at the counter and chat with their fellow patrons. They needed to get in and get out. And Starbucks, the founders of Starbucks, I think that they picked up on that a little bit. And I think it's interesting that with Starbucks, it was actually founded by 3 gentlemen, but they had brought in a guy who was a marketer. And he came from very humble beginnings, but this marketer had been to Italy and he had experienced the Italian cafe, the coffee cafe. And so he's the one who brought kind of that European vibe and feel to the Starbucks market. And yet he and the original 3 owners and founders of Starbucks didn't necessarily see eye to eye, so they went their separate ways. So this marketer goes and he actually opens his own coffee shops following this model that he believes so much in and does quite well. He actually ends up with, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 different locations, but they were doing quite well. And then the founders of Starbucks, they were offered an opportunity from the founder of Peet's Coffee, Peets. And so they decided that they wanted to purchase Peet's, and they offered the Starbucks brand to this gentleman who had been their former marketer. There's a little lesson in that for leaders. I want to just point out that anytime we want to find an opportunity, we need to make sure that we haven't burned our bridges. Sometimes we get really opinionated and we stand so strongly and firmly on our ideas that we shut doors. We end up closing down relationships. And as a result, we may miss opportunities in the future. And so I love the idea that that did not happen with any of these gentlemen. They actually maintained a healthy relationship, even though they parted ways. And sometimes there can be a growth that happens actually because people part ways. So the coffee movement, I'll call it, and I actually just finished watching the movie, the Jesus Revolution. And one of the interesting things I found in that movie was how at one point the 2 main leaders of this movement actually parted ways for a few years. Well, because they parted ways, it actually expanded the influence. So sometimes there's greater performance that happens when 2 fantastic leaders go their separate ways, because they actually spread the good news of whatever it is that they have to offer with more people, because now they're not all together in the same location. They've widened their reach, if you will. I think that's an important point for any leader to consider, because sometimes we can feel hurt. We can feel angry. We can feel disappointed and disillusioned because things haven't went well or are not going well with another leader. But I think sometimes we need to open our minds to the possibility that it's just opportunity knocking on the door for us to, expand that influence further. And I think that's a good lesson that we can learn from the coffee wars as well as the Jesus Revolution. So the thing that happened, though, when the gentleman who ended up purchasing Starbucks, what he did is his model was premium coffee, very nice, comfortable environment or ambiance for folks to enjoy their coffee. And, for people to be able to have more of that leisurely experience. So that was his perspective. And so that was the way that his company performed with him driving it. Well, Dunkin' Donuts, on the other hand, ended up being inherited by the son who founded it. And he was in a little bit of a quandary because they had a board of directors, and the board of directors basically came to him and said, we're not happy. Sales are tanking. We think it's time for a change, and we want you to move on. Now, can you imagine? Your father founded the company. You're in this topmost leadership, but you have to answer to a board of directors. Some of you may be able to identify with that. And yet they want to oust you. That was where he was at. But I love what he did. He had ingenuity and he had a little chutzpah. So he said, will you give me a quarter? Just give me 1 quarter to see what I can do to turn things around. If there's no improvement, then I will go, no argument, no debate. I'll just move on my way. Well, the board actually gave him 6 months. And what he did within those 6 months was tremendous. And this is a prime example of doing something very differently from another leader. So I'm thinking of the Starbucks leader who, again, the vision was we're going to do premium, very higher end ambiance, even including the naming of their products. How many of us now know what venti is because we've been to Starbucks? But if we haven't been to Italy, we wouldn't have known. That was the vision, and so he was able to charge a more premium price. But he probably, and I would say this is probably very true of the Starbucks model until like the big drive-through move came in, that they probably sold less product, but because of a higher price point, they had a greater margin of profit. And so they could have lesser volume, but still have a very good profit. So I think that worked for them. But Dunkin' Donuts, what happened in that 6-month period with this younger man who had taken over the leadership, he decided they had the counters. He realized that they had a space there that was taking up 80% of the room. But when he looked at their numbers, what was sold at the counter only represented 20% of their income. Okay. That's a learning lesson for any leader. We all are familiar with the 80-20 rule now. We need to be looking at that 80-20 rule in conjunction with what we're selling, services or products. What are our highest profit margin products or services? And we need to put more emphasis on that instead of allowing space to be sucked away or taken up by things that are not as profitable. Well, this gentleman at Dunkin' Donuts actually recognized that. So I think there was over 1,600 stores at that time. And so he sent out a mandate that all of the counters would be changed to make it easier and more comfortable for people who were on the go to come and grab coffee and donuts. Well, he had basically changed the landscape of coffee sales at that point. And so very different model, different perspective, different way of performing in the business, but equally effective. Now let's talk about a third player in this coffee wars game, and that is McDonald's. So here you have Starbucks, the very high-end price point. You have Dunkin' Donuts, which I would call like a middle-of-the-road price point. And then you have McDonald's, and they were really smart, and they began to capitalize on the Great Recession of 2008, 2009 here in the US. And so they launched a marketing blitz, and they had billboards put up that read $4 is dumb, which is a play on words for Starbucks is dumb. And what they were insinuating was that it's dumb to pay at that time $4 for a cup of coffee. And now at the time I'm recording this, who wouldn't love to only pay $4 for a cup of coffee? But what they were doing is they were making a jab at Starbucks, and they tapped into the marketplace where maybe the quality wasn't quite at the level of a Starbucks or even a Dunkin', but they still had like the flavored and the sweetened coffees that a lot of people like. And, I'll be honest, I mean, nothing against McDonald's. I'm not a fan of their straight coffee. I feel like it's very bitter and it's just not pleasing to my palate. Some of you may like it a lot. But by adding those sweeteners and helping to mask some of the bitterness of their coffee and yet offer it at a lower price point, they began to kick off another coffee war with Starbucks, especially. I think it also impacted Dunkin', but what it did is it really, just shot through the roof, their coffee sales. And coffee is a multi-billion-dollar business. And the lesson in all of this, though, is I think about leadership and the different approaches of the leaders of each of these three different companies. And there are many other coffee companies out there that have their own philosophies. But the thing is, each of them worked. They worked in their own way. They worked for their customers. And it's something that we can all learn from. We can realize that there's something that we might do a little bit differently, but it's going to work for us. So I do a lot of marketing in my P4 Power Coaching practice. I actually have specific marketing coaches or marketing scopes. I love marketing. When I believe in something, it is just fun for me to not only do marketing, but to teach marketing. I love helping businesses and organizations like skyrocket their income and their profitability because of the marketing work that we do with them. And one of the things that I start with in any of my marketing scopes is to really challenge and press in on leadership, and whether that's the general overall leadership or the marketing leader or both, which frankly I prefer in the beginning at least to work with both to make sure that we hone in on this and identify this well. But to really identify who the preferred ideal avatar is. Now, the avatar is that representation, that persona, if you will, of the average customer that frequents their business. And the ideal preferred avatar is someone that you want frequenting your business and referring you to other people, because typically we surround ourselves with like-minded folks. And not every customer is for every business. So we need to know that. And in leadership, we need to especially be intentional about that. We need to make sure that we're marketing to the folks that we want coming and going in and out of our businesses. Well, these folks in the coffee wars, actually, I think maybe they weren't as intentional as I am in my marketing scopes with my clients, but still yet consciously, and I think subliminally, they did tap into their own ideal preferred avatar. And they were able to market and sell to those folks, which exponentially increased their profit margins. And the other thing that happens that we don't talk enough about is when you as a leader driving the mission and the values of your company are very clear on who your ideal avatar is. Then your employees, you communicate that to them and they get on board with that. Then we all are working in a very focused way toward the same common goal. And we end up widening our reach for those ideal customers or clients that we want to work with. And so when we do that, it's very interesting how performance increases. It enhances. It's like everybody gets energized because we're paddling in that same direction. So, leader, for you, if you're listening to this, what I want you to take away from this particular podcast is just a couple of very specific points. One, I'm going to go back and say again, be brave. Be brave to follow your vision through. But two, as a leader, make sure that you are clearly communicating your vision to your people. Because if they don't understand, if you think somehow they're going to read your mind or that they know, I hear this a lot from some of my clients. Oh, my people know. You'd be surprised when I go out and I interview some of those people, how little they really know about what is on your mind, what your objectives and goals are. And if you don't clearly communicate that and get them on board, they can't move in the same direction. And oftentimes this is where things go a little bit wonky in a business because you have your mind set on going in this direction. Your people think they're supposed to go in a different direction, and you end up pulling against each other instead of strengthening your efforts and propelling you forward faster. So make sure that you clearly communicate to your people what that preferred avatar is, what the goals and objectives are, how you want to approach it, what's your vision, what's your mission. Because when you do, performance rises, productivity increases. And when those things happen, then that bottom line gets blacker. And isn't that the ultimate goal? Because you're not going to have anything to lead if you do not make sure that you are supporting and maintaining whatever it is you're trying to build, whatever it is you're trying to offer. There's got to be strength in that. And so you as a leader, that is your responsibility. And the other thing I want you to take away from this podcast is, even though it can be really hard sometimes in a leadership position, no lie, it can be lonely at the top. But a lot of times it's what you make of it. You can create lonely. But as a leader, what are you doing to infuse a little bit of fun along the way? What are you doing to involve your people more and glean some of their creativity? Some of the things that happened in all of these coffee businesses, as well as many, many others around the world, is when you involve your people and you start learning about some of their ideas, it's amazing what employees can bring to the table, especially those on the front line. And again, when they're part of something, when they feel like their ideas are considered and even especially implemented, they get excited and they are energized and passionate and they want to do even more. And that drives performance to higher levels. If you want to lead high performance, take all of these things into consideration. And then challenge yourself. Challenge yourself like the Dunkin Donuts guy did, and who, by the way, did it so successfully, he ended up working at Dunkin for decades afterward. Challenge yourself to do something in the next 6 months that is going to stretch you. Challenge yourself in the next 6 months is going to grow the business in ways that may almost feel impossible, but you say, you know what, I'm going to make the impossible possible. That kind of thinking and mindset can drive performance in almost miraculous ways. And here's the thing. Just like the coffee industry has changed and I would argue improved the lives of many of us, who knows that in your business, for such a time as this, that you, by following that vision, aren't going to make a difference in many lives, a positive difference. And for me, that's part of my mission. I told you what my mission is. My mission through P4 Power Coaching is to increase the income, prime the profits, and strengthen the sustainability for American businesses. I am passionate about that. But I'm also passionate that along the way, that I'm not going to be a lonely leader. I'm going to bring a little fun into it, even as we dig in and we do the hard work and we learn some things along the way too. But it's my way of making a difference in the world. So what's yours? You are a leader. And as I always remind you, you can make a difference where you are. I do believe that you are where you are on purpose, with purpose, and you are intended to make an abundant purpose impact. So challenge yourself to that today. And in the meantime, hey, go out and enjoy a great cup of coffee. Until I see you next time, stay intentional, be exceptional. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. There's magic in meeting with an objective, and I always have an objective for you, not only in these episodes, but also from the other resources I offer on my website, anitabrooks.com. That's ANITABROOKS.com. There you'll find information on digital courses, webinars, books, workbooks, of course, my in-person P4 Power Coaching for businesses and organizations. And if you need a speaker for your conference or your strategic retreat, I'm your gal. But I'm also excited to let you know about a new service that we're offering. For less than half the price of a daily Starbucks latte for a month, you can join our P4 Power Coaching community. This is a monthly membership where you'll get insider tips. And you'll also be able to join our monthly Zoom meetings that are one part strategy sessions, one part mastermind, one part networking, one part coaching. I can promise you, you'll not only learn from me, but you'll learn from others in the group. We'll also have monthly webinars as part of the P4 Power Coaching community, and we'll have coaching resources and exercises. And you'll get first opportunities and special offers for many of the other things that we have to offer. And of course, you will get leadership encouragements. The P4 Power Coaching community is all about growth, success, and celebrating our wins. And remember, it's never too late for a fresh start with fresh faith. So embrace your exceptional leadership impact with fresh resolve to make the difference you were made for.